everyone, and welcome to another video. So this one is going to be the entirety of my anime collection. It will be longer than just the summary video I did a couple weeks ago. And so I'll be going into a little bit more information about each title. Hopefully this won't take as long as my manga collection. But knowing me, we'll see how that goes. Because as we all know, my best intentions always end up leaving these videos incredibly long. So here is your forewarning. But before I spend too long on this intro, I'll just get straight to it. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. So on this first shelf, we have a bunch of Blu-ray box sets from a variety of countries. The US, UK, Australia, Japan, even Korea with this standalone complex set. And yeah, just a bunch of shows on Blu-ray and sometimes DVD as well. And I'll just show off in these a little bit more in just a second. So the first of the Blu-ray box sets that were on that first shelf is Blue Exorcist. This is the Aniplex of America release. Box sets 1 and 2. So the artwork on this. And this just contains the entirety of the first season of the show on Blu-ray, obviously, with dub and subtitles. This was one of the first Aniplex releases I ever bought. I don't buy too many Aniplex releases because there are cheaper alternatives from other regions, the UK and Australia, basically. But this was before I really shifted my thinking in that. I do also have the film, which was the third set for this series. And whether or not I'll be picking up the most recent season on Blu-ray is still up for debate. Not quite sure yet, but I probably won't be getting the lovely but overpriced Aniplex versions. Next is a UK release of Your Lie in April. This only has part 1 in it, and this is actually the replacement set. I did have the original release of this, but due to some issues with sizing, this digipack, which contains the first half of the show, didn't actually fit very well into this bit didn't fit well into this bit, and the sizing was off, so they completely replaced all the entire thing. Part 2 has just recently been released in the UK, although I have yet to buy it myself. Again, this was a show released in America by Aniplex, one that the UK release was a lot cheaper for, and I don't adore this show nearly as much as a lot of other people. I find that to be the case generally when we're talking about very sad or dramatic series. I find a lot of things tip too much into melodrama for me. So some of the quote unquote saddest anime series ever, I find sort of middle ground on. And Your Lie in April isn't really an exception to that, which is also another reason why I didn't want to be spending a massive amount of money on a release. I do still enjoy the show, and I like a lot of stuff from it, but it's not a perfect series in any way, shape, or form. But yes, that is the UK release of that. Next is a US release. The recent Blu-ray set of Death Note by Viz. This is the Amiga edition, which has both the television show and the sort of recap / spin-off / wrap-up, whatever, films. This was the first show that I ever watched, anime-wise, with the knowledge of anime. So it was sort of a big thing for me to get this on Blu-ray. I had it on DVD previously, but yeah, it's not a massive visual upgrade, but the audio quality is a lot better, and Blu-rays are a bit more future-proof at this point than DVDs, just as a general rule, so that's why I decided to upgrade. The next series is one that I think was very, very, very popular in its day and sort of quite controversial, but I always had fun with it, although it's not it's not phenomenal, and that is Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt, the complete series on Blu-ray. This initially had a DVD-only limited edition release, but I passed on that just because I sort of had a feeling that a Blu-ray would be released eventually, and of course I was proven right. This series is one that I really enjoy elements of, and then I really sort of despise elements of, but overall it's quite fun and just sort of mindless entertainment, and you can't fault it for doing that well, because it really does do it well, and it has some pretty good episodes that explore the setting and the premise a lot more than you would maybe expect from a show like this. So yeah, Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt. The next is a Japanese release. This is the Blu-ray release of Razafon. This is a semi-recent pickup for me. I got it, I feel like, less than 6 months ago. I don't quite know, but Razafon is definitely one of the sort of classic late 90s, early 2000s mech shows that I think it was definitely inspired by Evangelion, but I think it's sort of overshadowed a lot by Evangelion. Although in some respects, I prefer this show much more than that one, although Evangelion is definitely a worthy in its own right for its popularity. But I absolutely adored this show. I got this particular box set secondhand, but as you can see, it's pretty much perfect quality, and it saved me several $100s. So yes, I'm glad that I was able to pick this up. This does have English dub and subtitles on, I think, both the show and the film. I haven't watched the film in this set yet, although I've seen it previously. So I can't remember, but I know the show definitely has the dub and English subtitles. So yes, it's a good option for people who adore the show and maybe want to see it on Blu-ray. It's a bit of an investment, but if you're that much of a fan, I'd highly recommend it. Next is the Japanese release of Durarara, the first season. This is the re-release, the Blu-ray box set re-release with different artwork from the initial. And again, another Japanese box set I got secondhand and therefore a lot cheaper than otherwise. It contains the whole series plus the drama CDs. I think there's 3 or 4 of those. Again, another release that has English subtitles as well as the English dub available, so you're not missing out on anything if you do decide to pick this one up. Durarara is a show that I do really enjoy, although I was never as enamored with it as a lot of people were when it was first initially coming out. But I do really enjoy it, and I think that it's nice to see that the entire series did eventually get a full adaptation, because the novels are quite good. I do still prefer Bakugo, but Durarara, for what it is it's fun, and it's got a great cast of kooky characters, just like Bakugo, although the setting is a little bit more mundane in just present day Ikebukuro. There's still a lot to enjoy from this series, and I have bought this show several times. I used to have the initial Aniplex 3 DVD set, and then I had the first Aniplex Blu-ray set of this. which I later sold to buy this one. My sister bought the 3 Australian DVD set release. We have owned this show too many times to even think about, so... and we're not even that huge of fans, but it is definitely a fun little series. Following that is actually something that has nothing in it. It's an empty box. But I bought to hold the 2nd season of Durarara. This is another Japanese release. Released for the singles of the, I think, 3rd part of Durarara X2. So this box should typically, like in Japan, hold 6 single releases, and because the US releases Aniplex release it in half-season sets, that makes 3 half-season sets for 3 seasons, so it makes 9. 9, I can't do my maths, what am I doing? It makes 6 sets, so it will all fit in this box. Each season did get one of these boxes, and I chose this one due to the characters featured, mainly Mikado and Izaya, but also Aoba. My reasoning for that is I find these 3 characters are sort of the same, they have the same personality and character arc, but due to their choices have gone in different directions, so it is sort of an interesting parallel between the 3 of them. And yeah, I have yet to buy any of the Aniplex releases, as you can tell, although I'm not in any great hurry. It'll happen someday. Next is a US release, although it does also have an Australian release in here, and that is Space Dandy. This is the limited edition that was released with Season 1. As you can probably tell. But in this set I have both seasons in there. We have the US release of Season 1, and then this is the Australian release of Season 2, which I got cheap second hand here. I can, obviously I can watch the discs, so it doesn't really matter. Nobody can see it that the spines don't match. It just so long as I had the show, it's no problem. Space Dandy, again, is another one that's just fun. It's not anything more than it needs to be, although it does have some very strong episodes that elevate the material from what it sort of starts as, especially the 2nd season. I do think the 2nd season is a lot stronger than the 1st. But yes, I enjoy it quite a bit. It was a very strong return to form by Watanabe, but yeah, not much more to say to that. Next is a Australian box set. This is the K-On! Box. This is the box set that came with the singles of the series, but I I took this box and I actually made it so that it would fit the entirety of the series in there. The 1st season in one set, the 2 halves of the 2nd season, and then the film, as you can see. Yeah, so I don't think any other country got like a box set for the singles. At least no other English-speaking country. We also got a box set for these 2 bits here in Australia, which was only 2 wide, as is probably expected. But I decided that you will see this a lot. I just sort of Frankenstein things to how I want them, as you just saw with Space Dandy. You'll see quite a bit of this in where I buy the box that will fit everything in it, because I like everything just complete in one little box. And yeah, that's how I prefer to display and collect my collection. Well, oh well, I'll clean that up later. Next is a US release. This is my sister's copy, so you will see some signatures on here. But this is Level E. A series that I don't think was very popular when it was released, but I find incredibly funny. Both of us find incredibly funny, although it is a little bit slower in the middle section, based off of Yoshihiro Togashi's manga of the same name. This is a little bit of a lost gem comedy-wise. Yeah. As you can see, my sister has it signed by Vic Mignogna, who was the voice actor for Prince Baka in this show, although I don't think I've ever seen the dub for this one. I think she has, but I have not. So I think she got it signed when he was at a convention here many years ago, probably at this point. He's been to conventions here a lot, so I don't know. I don't know which particular one it is, but as for the show itself, it's very funny. I know that this particular box set was on the save line for a long time. I'm fairly certain you can still get these limited editions quite easily. That they're not super hard to find, which is just a show of like how unpopular this release actually was, is a shame. But yeah. I can't complain because I do actually really like this show. And finally, for this first shelf, we have the two Korean standalone complex releases. This is the entirety of season 1 in one box. Again, with English dub and subtitles. So unlike the Japanese releases that only have the dub and no subtitles, you do have that option with these Korean releases. And season 2. As you can probably tell, these are the lenticular releases, so the very, very first limited edition releases that were released in Korea. You can no longer get these sets with the lenticular and the slipcovers and all these things, but you can get more standard, just box sets, which are just as nice and have the exact same discs, so you're not missing out. This last case in here, I took the special features disc out and switched it with the Solid States, Solid State Society, just Blu-ray single disc, which is technically the follow-up to the second season, just because, again, wanted it all in one spot, and that extra disc with a bunch of Korean specials on it is safely put away with other extra stuff. So yes, these were a little bit I know they were very desirable when they first came out. The Blu-ray, this show has since been released on Blu-ray, although with a lot of issues, so I'm sure that these are still very much sought after, especially these releases, and I highly recommend picking these up if you have the chance, especially the more standard releases, because they're quite a bit cheaper, and they're definitely a value for money, in my opinion. Continuing with Blu-ray box sets, again, a bunch of Australian stuff, US stuff, and some UK stuff as well. No Japanese sets on this particular shelf, although there are more upcoming, I believe. On the second shelf, we start with another Australian release, although this does also have a UK part in it, and that is the first collection of Attack on Titan. Mainly bought for, again, this box. It came with the first half of the show and a bunch of necklaces, things like that I'm not really super interested in. And as you can see, this does have two parts in it. This is the UK release because it was much cheaper when I wanted to buy the series. Here in Australia, we did have a collection too, which had like the second bit within its own box and with more extra, physical extra stuff. And I was like, but you made space for it and I don't understand. So that was a little bit weird. But nevertheless, I bought this one particularly just to have it all in one set. I have yet to watch the second season of Attack on Titan. I haven't started anything for this new season of anime, which is very, very unusual, but I am a busy person, so it's not going anywhere. I'll watch the shows when they're done, you know. Next is another Australian release, and this is the Puelamaji Madoka Magica release. Yeah, the box in the singles. Again, another signature. I don't know. I don't remember when that happened or which convention. The entire show on 3 discs, similarly to the US release, but of course the US never got like a complete series box like this, up until recently with Aniplex re-releasing it. But this was the initial release, so we had this limited edition box with the first volume and then space to fit the rest. And I am quite happy with this, as I shouldn't have to really introduce Madoka. I'm pretty sure everybody knows about it. And yeah, it's a very, very good show. Next is a US release, one that is very hard to find nowadays. And that is Serial Experiments Lane, the complete collection. These box sets were not made to the best quality, so you can see there's a bit of tape here just to prevent peeling on the spine. But as for the show itself, it is amazing, even more relevant today than it is, or than it was when it was initially released in the late 90s. It's a great show, guys. Again, not one I think I really need to explain too much. Everybody knows that Lane is good. Like, it's stayed a classic for so long for a reason, and it's definitely got a topic that now and in the future I think will stay pretty universal and pretty relevant, just with our interaction and our relationship with technology. It only ever continues to grow as years go by, so yes, I don't think Serial Experiments Lane will ever truly feel dated in the message it's trying to, or the story it's trying to tell, or the message it's trying to give. And this is a huge release. It has a bunch of like line art and actual artwork and all that sort of thing. So yes, this show recently got a similar UK release, although it is DVD size rather than Blu-ray. So I don't know if that's maybe a cheaper, better option that you guys want. That is always there. Next is Erica 7, the Blu-ray re-release from Funimation from a couple years ago. I used to have this on Australian DVD, although those DVDs were not the greatest, and this is a very, very, very fun mech show. I am a big fan of majority of Bones' series, and even these original shows are definitely some of their strongest stuff, although, I mean, their adaptations are very, very good as well. Erica 7, again, one I don't think I need to really introduce. Most people know Erica 7. This does have both parts in this box set. And the second of these, I do also have the sequel, the Astral Ocean box, which I know like huge fans despise this sequel. I think it's more in vein with the original than the film was, which was like a alternate universe sequel version. I don't know. Erica 7 has had a lot of adaptation stuff going on, and I don't really hate this series as much as I think a lot of other people do. And the actual voice acting work from the young Seiyu who voiced Al was incredibly good. It was one of his first roles, and he was actually age appropriate. It was pretty dang great. But as you can see, this does have the Australian second half in it compared to the US first half, whereas this has both parts from the US. Again, just because I prefer to have the show however I can get it, and the cheaper option is always the best option. So yeah, Erica 7 and Erica 7 AO or AO or Astral Ocean or whatever you want to call it. Next is another recent Funimation release. This is the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya Ultimate Collector's Edition. So this has both seasons on Blu-ray. This is the Australian release of the film, so I didn't have to wait for Funimation's recent re-release. And then the Haruhi-chan and Ouran Choria-san OVAs, and then the disappearance of Nagito Yuki-chan, which is the spin-off show that I have heard is not very good. I haven't watched, so I wouldn't know. But Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya at the time was really what shifted the market in anime. It definitely became a genre defining show, and for what it's worth, I know people hate the second season due to Endless 8, and a lot of people said it was going to be the fall of Kyoto Animation. The main show, even the Endless 8 stuff, is still pretty solid. It's dated a lot, but it is a fossil of its time. It's a product of its time, and at the time it was new. Nowadays we have a million shows like this, but it really did set the standard for what these shows could be and the character sort of tropes and that sort of thing. The film I stand by being absolutely one of my favorite films that this studio has put out, and I've seen quite a few of their films, even their non-franchise films. I've seen a lot of their franchise films, but this one, even as a part of a franchise film, is probably the strongest I've ever seen for a franchise. It brought back a lot of good faith to the community after Endless 8, and it is definitely easy to see why. As for the extra stuff, like I said, I haven't seen Yuki-chan, but I have seen Haruhi-chan and Ouran Choria-san. That's just, it's mindless, but it's got some pretty chuckly bits to it, so I don't really have an issue with it. As for whether I'll be watching Disappearance of Nagito anytime soon, who knows? But as for the Haruhi Suzumiya herself, she's certainly something, and I will watch the film over and over and over again, so I have no problems with having this in the collection. Next is a UK release. This is actually it's not a steelbook, but it's called a metal pack release of Gankutsuo, the Count of Monte Cristo. This is the collector's edition that Anime Limited put out. And this show is not it didn't have the greatest Blu-ray transfer just because it is so busy that a lot of detail was lost. But I adore this show so much, and I adore this packaging so much. I still have my old Funimation DVDs when it was released in the thin pack. It was one of the first shows I ever bought. So that might say something about my tastes. But this is a phenomenal series. I really highly recommend it. It is quite, I'm fairly certain it's not that hard to find on DVD in the US. You're not really losing anything by not having the Blu-ray, but this is one that I sort of wanted to future-proof regardless of whether or not it was an upgrade. So, yes. Anime Limited did a pretty good job with this. They did the best with the actual source material video files that they had. And, absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous collector's edition. Next is another Anime Limited release, and it's a recent one, so hopefully some of you guys would have seen this in my recent pickup video, although it was a couple months ago now, and that is Gurren Lagann. This is the edition that has both the show and the films on Blu-ray in there, and this was a Zavi exclusive, after their Ultimate Edition release. This was in prep for, you know, fans who either didn't have the Ultimate Edition or wanted a nice release or just wanted something more than the standard releases. Again, another just fun show. It doesn't try to be anything more than it is. I think there are some fans that see it as more than it is, but it's, as the show itself, it's just a lot of fun. Nothing, like, I think this is the epitome of, like, a joyful experience when it comes to anime, in just that it doesn't have to take itself super seriously for you to enjoy it, but it's not completely brainless. It's not switch your brain off either. There is quite a few very interesting elements to this show. It's not, you know, my favorite show. It's not even my favorite mech anime, but it's still pretty solid, and the show itself does look gorgeous on Blu-ray. There are a couple video issues on this particular UK release, but I wasn't annoyed by them enough to spend the incredible amounts of money that the US singles would just for like 13-14 seconds worth of video issues. I'm happy with just sucking it up and saving like $200. And next is a Funimation release. This is a show, again, that I've bought a lot of times, although it's not particularly one of my favorites, so, like Durarara on the last shelf. This is Funimation's recent collector or premium edition release of Eden of the East. The edition that has the show and the 2 films, and then this. I hate when the extras are in the box. I know people are annoyed that like they put the boxes outside. I really am not, because this is such a waste of space. This does have art cards in it though. I don't know, guys. Physical extras are so, like, they're so pointless to me. It's just more junk. But as for the show itself, again, not like, it's not super fantastic. Like, I don't find it one of the greatest stories of all time, but it's a pretty decent little show. I know people were pissed off at the end of the second film. I wasn't particularly. It's just a pretty interesting speculative science fiction near future series that definitely is pretty fun to watch. And this is a beautiful release by Funimation, despite this. I'm not the biggest fan of their digipacks, especially compared to what Anime Limited has been putting out somewhat recently. But this is sleek, simple, and a pretty fun show that I do rewatch probably more than I expected to when it first came out. Next are a bunch of Viz releases, all for the same show, and that is Ranma 1/2. This is a great release for a classic comedy. Really looking forward to the 8th and final movie OVA set, whenever that may come. So I have parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and finally 7. The entirety of the TV show on Blu-ray. I've never been super into Takahashi's work. I was never an Inuyasha fan. That was a little before my time as an anime fan. so I never really got into Inuyasha or a lot of her other stuff. But Ranma One Half, even though I'm a recent fan getting into it, it's still very, very funny, although quite repetitive. With a show this long that is a comedy, it does tend to be that way. But yeah, just still very funny. I can definitely see why Takahashi is so well respected and still so prolific, both in Japan and outside of Japan. And Viz did a great job with these releases, and the actual video quality is gorgeous, of course, coming from the Japanese release of, so the whole quality of it is just gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. Definitely worth the upgrade if you haven't yet to do that. It's, yeah, definitely worth the investment, whether or not you get those limited edition sets or the more standard Blu-ray sets. Okay, so next is another UK release. This is one show over 2 sets, and that is Full Metal Alchemist, the original 2003 show on Blu-ray. This came in the Ultimate Edition, so it did come with a very large duplicate gate packaging. The more standard collector's editions did come with slipcovers for these, but I prefer to have the actual limited edition or premium edition, whatever, Ultimate Edition, that's what they call them. This was one of the first shows that I ever watched as an anime, and it's the first show that really brought me into this sort of community, the anime community, and wanting to watch more shows and buying things. And Fullmetal Alchemist was the first show on DVD I ever bought. I was a little bit I never this and then but it was a little bit after the singles were released. I do have friends who bought the singles. I bought the half-season collection sets, which were more affordable, thankfully. But yes, finally getting this show on Blu-ray in such gorgeous packaging. I couldn't have been happier. There was the US release that I did have for a little while, although I have since sold that. And I know this show is not the easiest to get anymore due to Aniplex, but it's a classic, and I love everything in this franchise, even the stuff that other people don't really love. I really, really do. This is probably my most nostalgic series that I own, full stop. Next is, well, this isn't technically a proper box release, but it's the Conqueror of Shamballa release. This is a little slipcover I made myself. As you can probably tell, you can see. Look, my printer ran out of ink. I will be redoing this somewhere down the line, but it's basically just the sequel film to, you can see the cardboard, isn't it so bad? But it's the sequel film to the 2003 series. Nothing much to say. This is probably the least liked of the entire Fullmetal Alchemist franchise, but I don't know, man. I didn't have too many issues. Like, there are things wrong with the 2003 anime, both the show and the film, but for what it was trying to do, it did it very well. Like, I can't fault it for trying to do its own thing and succeeding for the most part, even if it is a little bit silly in hindsight. And following that up, we have the Brotherhood box set that was released here in Australia. The box itself came with the OVAs of the series, so it was one of the last things released. But it contains the 5 singles of the television show, the OVA, and the Sacred Star of Milos film, all in one set. So everything related to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is right here. Again, this was a series I have bought several times. I bought the original US releases of the 5 DVD sets. I had the US release of the OVAs and the film. I also had the UK release of the OVAs, which is like actual Blu-ray size, as well as the the half season sets. I have owned this show in multiple ways, but once I finally got this, I sold off all my other copies because this is pretty much the epitome. Although it takes up much more shelf space than probably a lot of people would be happy with, I love this show, so I don't care that I'm probably wasting space by dedicating such a huge portion to such a large box. But it's such a nice box, too. Like, how could you ever not want this? I don't know, guys. Next is another UK release. This is Ping Pong the animation, anime limited release, so digipack in this chipboard slip. This particular release doesn't have any like secondary artwork on the back. Normally this is just paper and then that, but because it was an older release that went through a long time worth of approvals, by the time it came out, like, they'd completely changed how they did things, unfortunately, and this was sort of just a straggler from the original release set. But regardless of that, this is a great show. I know I knew that when I saw that the US was only getting a standard edition for this series, that I was going to wait for the UK release, just because I loved this show and it really deserved better than just a keep case and a slipcover. It's one of... I really like Yuasa's work anyway, but this is a very solid manga and very interesting sports series. So I definitely recommend it to you. Again, within the vein of a sports series about a sport that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know. I tend to enjoy those a lot, and Ping Pong is no exception to that rule. And finally, for that shelf, we have the amazing, wonderful, phenomenal horror series Shiki, a vampire series in which I can never lay enough praise. This is phenomenal. This series gave me nightmares. My sister and I watched it as it was airing, and it's so good. I've never seen the dub, although I do hear pretty good things about it. But I knew as soon as Funimation licensed it that I would be buying it in this limited set. I know you can get like complete collection save edition stuff now, but oh guys, this is so good. I had seen some horror anime before, things like Higurashi, and was another before or after this? I don't remember. But I'd seen Monster, which is less horror and more thriller. Shiki is the perfect blend of both. It's as much a psychological thriller as it is just straight up horror. And oh, it's so good. It didn't seem that popular when it was initially airing, but I know that when it was released and more people gave it a shot, it definitely grew a pretty large and dedicated fan base. So yes, if you have the opportunity to watch this show, do it. It's so good. Don't let the fact that it's about vampires put you off, and don't let the fact that it's sort of a slower start put you off, because that's perfect. Like, Japan has perfected the art of suspense, and this show, more than anything, does it wonderfully. Like I said, it may take a little while to actually build up, but once you hit that halfway mark, there is no going back. It's crazy. So yes, definitely highly recommend this one for horror fans out there. Shelf 3 continues with the Blu-ray box sets, and again, mix of all sorts of releases from different countries, which I will show off in just a second. So onto the third shelf, we do have a couple science adventure series. If you're not familiar what that means, hopefully it shall become more obvious. With Steins Gate, the complete set, the Japanese standard release of the film, and Robotics Notes, the complete set, with the UK second half. Now, these are both shows that are sort of congenially related. They're semi-sequel. The Robotics Notes is a semi-sequel to Steins Gate. Obviously, Steins Gate is much more well-respected and well-known. Although I do really, really enjoy Robotics Notes as its own thing. I didn't have the expectations on it that I think a lot of people did after Steins Gate. I do really enjoy Steins Gate, and I think it's probably the best of the science adventure adaptations, but I don't love it with a fiery passion. It's not in my top 10 or anything. If you're not familiar with the science adventure series, it is all of those shows with the semicolon in it. So Chaos Head, Occultic Notes, is that what that recent one was? And Chaos Child was another one recently, as well as, I feel like there's something else, but I can't remember. Steins Gate, of course, being the most popular and most highly regarded. Robotics Notes has a very interesting setting. I like the near future version of reality they've created, in that it's realistic and achievable for, the next 10 years or whenever it was, however far it was projecting to, where it was mostly just an increase in virtual reality, which is stuff that you do see happening all the time now. I think the show's set in 2019, and I mean, we're in 2017, that's 2 years away. It's hardly a stretch to imagine that we'd see a lot more augmented and virtual reality stuff going on. We see it all the time. So I think it was a very smart way to do that, and I think that's one of the big reasons I enjoyed it, as well as the actual characters. I think it's a great cast. Not everybody agrees with me, but I do really like the show on its own merits as a separate thing from Steins Gate. They're not really that related anyway, so I mean, it's just dependent on personal tastes. But yeah, these are the only two science adventure series I own. I have seen Chaos Head, but of course, if you're familiar with that anime adaptation, it's a complete mess. I did watch Occultic Notes, which was interesting from like the standpoint of it being a supernatural series, technically. But again, a bit of a mess, and it certainly didn't help that it was really just the second part was made up and the ending was made up, and like, because the light novels have only really just started and all those sorts of things. But yeah, not like science adventure stuff is always interesting as an idea, but as for actual how they turn out after being adapted is always a bit of a hit or miss. And I think that Steins Gate and Robotics Notes are probably the best that we've seen so far from those visual novels. Next is a series I absolutely adore. It's the UK release of Bakugo, the collector's edition. If you're familiar with the show, this image is fairly familiar, I'm sure. It was the Japanese Blu-ray box set artwork. They also used it for the American Blu-rays. And I missed out on the Aniplex like $60 Blu-ray limited edition that they did. One of their first releases they ever put out. So I had the standard I had the DVDs for a long time, and then I had the standard Blu-ray for a long time. But I upgraded to this set mostly because I do love a good chipboard set, as you've probably noticed. And the digipack, the art book, everything with it, I was happy to spend the money. This really is one of my absolute favorites. I adore this show a lot more than Durarara. I do enjoy Durarara, but for different reasons. But Bakugo is one I can always go back to and always enjoy myself, even when I know what's going to happen. And I find the setting a lot more interesting than Then Durarara. Modern day Ikebukuro is a little less enticing than 1930s Prohibition era, gangster New York. That's just it's so much more interesting, at least in my opinion. So that's, again, another big reason I enjoy Bakugo. I do recommend both light novel series, though, if you have any interest in reading those. Next is another Brainspace show. So the previous show was animated by Brainspace, as was this one. Princess Jellyfish, released by Funimation, and this is a show that I absolutely adored. I knew I would enjoy it. At the time, I was watching pretty much all of the Notamine shows that were coming out, and this, I think, is one of the last truly that truly embraced the idea of the Notamine block. If you're not familiar with Notamine, it was a block of time in which very niche shows would be broadcast, but we did get a lot of very interesting, very niche things, including things like Trapeze, or Welcome to Irabu's Office, which is the alternate title to that. Things like Nodame Cantable, Honey and Clover. I'm trying to think of other things, but there's lots. But after Guilty Crown was their first two-core show, at least with the 11 episode standards for the seasons, it really changed. It felt like it was pandering a lot more to the general audience, which was sort of the antithesis of what that block was meant to be. But Princess Jellyfish arose from that block of programming, and it really does encapsulate what is perfect and why it was an important thing to have within the industry, because without it, we wouldn't get shows like this. And Brainspace really, at the time, was one of the few studios to really take risks, as well as Manglobe, who are sadly not with us anymore, and most recently with Studio Mappa. They all, in my opinion, they all animate things that really are different from what the trends are in the larger anime community and industry. Brainspace now, it has really not, they're not necessarily, I don't feel that they've stuck to that. They do try and, a lot of their recent shows have been a lot more pandering to the otaku sensibilities, although Studio Shuka, their subsidiary, has been doing some good work for them, although not necessarily to the same level. But anyway, if you have seen any of my previous videos, you know I'm a huge fan of the series. Absolutely adore it. Phenomenal series about friendship and self-acceptance in the fashion industry and politics and all sorts of things. It's wonderful. It's really, really, really funny. I encourage you to watch this show. I know you can get the Save DVD release, and buy the manga because it's really good. And Kodansha deserves your money because it's a wonderful series. Next is speaking of Studio Mappa, next is a Studio Mappa show, Taran Resonance, and this is what I mean by being a little bit more risky, a little bit not within the expected for anime. If you're not familiar with Taran Resonance, it is a show about domestic terrorism in Japan, and so not exactly the most conservative of topics, shall we say, but this is a show that I bought without having seen it, although I did have a lot of very trusted friends and reviewers' opinions saying that it was really, really good, so I did sort of expect to like it, and I have since watched it, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, this series, directed by Shinichiro Watanabe, so of Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo fame, so it does have some big names attached to it, So not necessarily a huge risk, but just the subject matter that it sort of tackles is definitely outside the realm of what is usually expected for anime. So yeah, I like when a studio and when anime can be challenging. I mean, we have plenty of fun, sort of just superfluous or pretty or action-packed series that come out every season. But when shows try to challenge you, make you think a little bit, that's where I think the medium really excels. And Taran Resonance, it's not perfect, but it definitely is more challenging than majority of the shows that were coming out at the time. Although I have a very bad memory of what was coming out. That was when I was still watching Hunter x Hunter every week, so that was my focus. But yes, Taran Resonance, very, very good. I do encourage you to stream it, watch it, however you want. You don't necessarily have to buy it, but it is worth your time. Next is another classic show that I absolutely adore. And this is a show that I bought on 3 accounts. I had the Australian DVDs, then the Australian Blu-rays, and now these are the UK Blu-rays, in which I've upgraded mainly due to packaging, and that is Ouran High School Host Club, a reverse harem, satirical, somewhat comedy, in which a poor girl ends up having to join her school's host club after breaking an incredibly expensive vase. And really, I mean, this show is over 10 years old. It is still hilarious. Bones did a wonderful job with this series. Bisco Hattori wrote an incredibly funny manga, and Bones did a great job adapting it. It is, of course, not a full adaptation of the manga, but what it does cover, it is great. It does have an original ending, like so many Bones shows of the era, but like most of them, it does actually work very well with the series. Actually, I think it inspired a lot of what the ending for the manga became later. Haruhi, if you have not seen this show, is probably one of the best main female protagonists, especially in one of these reverse harem situations or shows. She's phenomenal. She's so great. But yeah, the show overall is just really fun. There's a lot of heart to it, and it's a classic. I definitely think it still holds up. It's one that maybe this new generation of fans haven't seen, or just sort of poo-poo it because it's girly and it's got a lot of pink and pretty boys, but it is so much more than that. It's really great, guys. There's a reason it's still so popular even now. Next, speaking of Shinichiro Watanabe, before with Taran Resonance, we have Cowboy Bebop, a show that needs no explanation. Probably the most culturally relevant show, even outside the anime community. Definitely one of the greats from the 90s. Certainly one of the most influential in introducing more mature anime to the Western world. And this particular release is the Amazon edition of the Blu-rays. There is the TV show as well as my copy of the film in here. The set didn't come with the film, but I did take out one of the art books to fit it in there. Just another example of me trying to fit everything in one box. But yes, I'm sure this series needs no introduction. If you haven't watched it, do. I mean, like, I don't know what you're doing if you haven't watched it. I tend to understand when people don't want to watch the quote-unquote classics because there's the expectation that you're not a real fan if you haven't seen this, which is, I mean, that's crap. Don't believe that. But at the same time, there's a reason this is so well loved even now. I mean, this show came out in 97, I think, and yeah, it's great. Like, it captured the minds of so many people for a damn good reason. And even now, I don't think there's really been a space, I don't want to say space opera, but a space western done so well, especially within anime. But yes. Cowboy Bebop. Next is another comedy series, one that I absolutely love, although I don't necessarily know how popular it is anymore. It was quite popular when it first came out, but I think this show really edged out the isekai genre. So this is The Devil is a Part-Timer, a story in which the demon lord and his right-hand man are sent to Earth and have now taken up residence in Japan, one working as a minimum wage worker at McDonald's, the other basically a house husband. And of course, the hero, the humans hero, who was saving the humans within the demon realm, has also come to Earth, and she works in a call center. We see a lot of this sort of show now, where an ordinary person is taken to a magical fantasy world, or vice versa, a magical person ends up in our world. It's a very, 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 very well established and old story. I mean, mythology has this. It's nothing new. But, and it's the perfect fish out of water scenario, but this show does it so, so well, and I think this series really edged out this resurgence in the isekai interest or trends within current anime. It was a little bit ahead of the curve with this new wave of interest. So, I mean, of course we have things like ReZero, and even Sword Art Online, and Grimgar, Fantasy and Illusion, whatever that's called. Overlord. I know some of these are video game stuff, but it's still the same basic principle. There's multitudes. I mean, I don't watch too many of them because I'm not really a huge fan of them, but this one is so perfectly comedically timed. And the characters have such great chemistry and interaction and dialogue, and at least on the Japanese side, the performances are spot on. It's hilarious. From what I understand of the dub, it's also pretty funny. I haven't seen it, but great, great, great show, and really, really encapsulates that fish out of water setup really well in a really likable way. Next is a Man Globe series, and this is the first of if I've spoken about this before, but this is Michiko and Hatchin, the directorial debut of Sayo Yamamoto, who is now incredibly popular and famous due to her recent show, Yuri on Ice. This was her first show she ever did. It is great. It's a road trip series about a mother and daughter traveling around Brazil looking for the father of Hatchin, the girl, and Michiko's ex-lover, I guess. This is the sort of story that I think really highlights why we need more female voices in the anime industry. It's so different from a lot of other stuff, especially that was coming out at the time. So Yamamoto has very specific themes in all of her series, including the one I'm going to show next, as well as Yuri on Ice. Very similar, although of course different, very different settings. But it is a very female sort of voice to her works, which is not a bad thing. Yes, but Michiko and Hatchin, great, great, great. It has both parts in there, and not a perfect series, but done with a lot of passion. You can see there's a lot of love in this series. another Yamamoto work, and this is a somewhat recent pickup of mine, although I watched the show back when it was airing in, God, 2012? I can't remember. And that is Lupin the Third, the woman called Fujiko Mine. The second of Yamamoto's shows, and although this is, of course, part of the larger Lupin franchise, even this is still a very very heady product of Yamamoto's influence. You can definitely see how she changed the characters and how she adapted it to a more modern and I want to say somewhat aware cultural representation of all of the characters. It's very interesting. I do recommend it. I'm sure if you're a Lupin fan, you've already seen it, but even if you're not, this stands alone. It stands on its own as a very strong series. It's only 12 episodes long, and really reflects how far Lupin has come over the 60 years that the franchise has been around. And next are Season 1 and Season 2 of Noragami. I love this show. It's not perfect, but I think this was a return to form for Bones. Since then, we've had a lot more Bones shows that have done very, very well, but I think Noragami really encapsulates what the studio can do with a good manga story. I stand by the idea that Bones is probably the best studio for anime or manga to anime adaptations. Almost all of them that they've done have been great. Their original stuff is usually very, very solid as well, although not always as popular. But Noragami is great. The tale of the idiot god whom basically just grants wishes and trying to, gain notoriety within the realm of the gods. It's pretty interesting. It has a good exploration of a lot of Japanese gods, as well as the idea of deities as in their most fundamental form. It's really good. I said that a lot, but it actually is really good. Noragami is a very nice show, and I like it for a lot of reasons. Next is another box that doesn't actually have anything in it. It's a Japanese box, and it does have the first volume of the series itself, but I'm keeping it, so when I buy the US release, I'll just put it in this box, and that is Hyoka. This is the first box, of course, with the first disc in there of the Blu-ray. I bought this box in Japan whilst I was there, not expecting this show to ever get licensed. It was more of a display piece, but yeah, so I got this box to fit the two parts from Funimation in there. Not really expecting to, but good things happen sometimes coincidentally. Next are two Funimation releases. Well, technically one is a Crunchyroll release, and that is Season 1 and 2 of Free, a show I really, really love. Again, if you've seen any of my videos, you know that I'm quite a big fan of this series, although a lot of people tend to just not give it any credit because it's a show for girls. It's a fan service show for girls. Although I wouldn't necessarily argue that for Season 1, but Season 2 really does evolve out of its initial premise and brings up a lot of stuff that I don't necessarily think a lot of sports series cover, or a lot of anime series in general. It handles some pretty heavy topics very, very well about expectation and graduation and self-sabotage, if you understand what that means, and just like the pressures of athletics on kids, but the pressures of high school anyway and graduation. It's done very, very well in this season. The first season is, of course, the recent crunchy, whatever, funny roll release of the series. And yes, this is the show people used to like to shit on before Yuri on Ice was a thing. And I don't, neither of those shows really deserve it. I find that even though this is, of course, like, it's got swimmers, so it's got, you know, boys wet, like, in swimsuits, it is a lot more than a fan service show. It does actually have a plot, that resolves itself and actually does some things. So, and honestly, like, I've never met a guy who's watched this show, at least majority of the show, and thought it was, like, bad. Like, it's an actually good show. Kyoto Animation knows how to do series well. And, yeah, free, I think, even though it was a change of pace for KyoAni, still sticks to a lot of their safeguards, and stalwarts of what has established them in the industry. So, yes. Free season 1 and Eternal Summer the second season. And then finally we have some Natsuverse stuff. The first being the, this is actually one I bought in Japan, but this is the standard edition of the Garden of Sinners films on Blu-ray. All 7 of the original films plus the epilogue film subtitled. This is the exact same as what was released later on in the US. And yeah, I didn't buy it from the US, but like I said, it's pretty much exactly the same. I also have the Recalled Out Summer OVA, which is a sequel to those films. This is the Aniplex release, mainly because the Japanese release did not have subtitles. Also, it was, or is DVD size, the limited edition at least, was DVD size compared to this Generation 2 or Blu-ray sized. So I decided to get those, or that one to match that box set. Next is the Australian release of Fate Zero with both seasons. This was released by Madman here in Australia, and contains, you know, the entirety of the show, a lot cheaper than the Aniplex releases in the US. Of course, also part of the Natsuverse, like Kara no Kyokai. Yep, again, another very popular show I don't think needs any real introduction. And then finally, Hanabi releases of the recent Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works releases. These are much larger box sets, as you can tell, but the Season 1 and Season 2, very similar to what the US got, but these are chipboard and actually have 4 discs. There's no soundtracks or anything with these. It is just the Blu-ray sets, which is fairly typical for Australian limited edition releases. So yeah, it's pretty much exactly what we expected. They're so big though, like they're so big, which is not always a great thing. The UK got pretty much identical releases to these there. And yes, that is the entirety of the third. And finally for the Blu-ray box sets is this shelf. Again, a variety of releases here, as well as some non-Blu box set releases for the rest of this shelf. For the fourth and final shelf of the Blu-ray box sets, at least not the Blu-rays, we have the Japanese release of Aka. A recent show that I absolutely love, the anime adaptation of Natsume Ono's manga of the same name. This version came with this outer box, but each part has its own box with digipack and book and sticker or postcards and everything else. It's so nice. It's so beautiful. And this series does come with English subtitles, as well as the little special OVA short episodes are English subtitles as well, which is not always a guarantee with Japanese releases, so that was a big happy surprise. The show has been licensed by Funimation, so we will probably see a US release somewhere down the line, but nothing to this beautiful release, so I'm perfectly happy spending the money on that, no problems. Next is another UK release of a show I absolutely adore. I used to have the Australian DVDs for this many a year ago. I have since upgraded for Blu-ray, and that is the Tatami Galaxy, a show that was never released in the US, unfortunately, for all my friends and watchers over there. But this is another one of those shows, part of the Notamine block, that really is very risky. It's not like anything else, based off of the novel of the same name. And take note that I said novel, not light novel, completely different things. But yes, incredibly interesting, thought-provoking work. And I cannot wait for the semi-sequel set in the same universe film that's coming from Science Saru, which is a studio, because I know I will love it, and this is really, really good. For all people who are wanting to watch this show who live in the UK or Australia, I do really encourage you to buy this set, because it's a legitimate English release on Blu-ray, and what more could you ask for, really? And Anime Limited did a great job. Next is a show that I'm sure many are familiar with, and this is a Viz release of Sailor Moon Crystal Part 1. This is all of Sailor Moon Crystal that I've seen. I didn't watch it on this, I watched it as it was streaming. I think I've seen up to just this box set, up to episode 14, and then I just never got back around to watching it. I've heard that season 3 is great. I will, of course, watch the rest of it. I don't really have a super nostalgia for Sailor Moon, but I do really respect what it did for the industry, and I think that Naoko Takeuchi definitely revived the magical girl genre during an age where it was sort of dying out. Sailor Moon Crystal, especially this first season, is very rough. There's some serious issues with it, but at the same time, I do like that we're getting sort of a modern reboot of the show, and that due to this series, we are getting more a more comprehensive release of the first 90s series that so many people are nostalgic for. Again, I'm not particularly, just because I never grew up watching it, but it is really, I think Sailor Moon was the role model of a generation and certainly influenced a lot of young people, girls and boys alike. So yes, I will continue to support Sailor Moon, and both Classic and Crystal, although it'll take me a little bit longer to actually pick up these Viz sets, just because it's not super high on my priority list. Although these are beautiful, beautiful releases. I do really like what Viz has done with them. Next is another show that is, I think, somewhat marred by its fans, or a certain vocal minority of the fan base, and that is Black Butler. Of course, this is Black Butler 2. It does actually have season 1 and 2 in there. This is the limited release that season 2 got. I'm not a huge fan of season 2, like majority of people, of the fans of this series. I definitely recommend the manga. Give it a shot. Don't listen to what people have said about it, because it's so much more than its reputation, especially as a very blatant fan servicey girl show. Like, oh, it's such a yo. It's really not. Like, it's not at all. It's quite a gripping gothic horror, and I really like the Victorian setting. The first season of this is a fairly solid little show. It's not perfect, but I actually really liked what they did with the ending, although it doesn't follow the manga. Black Butler as a whole, I've always had tonal issues between the dark dramatic stuff and the comedy. It doesn't always balance out super well, but I do think that it's still definitely worth a watch, especially if you like sort of dark drama series. This is one to check out. Season 1 is going out of print. Funimation is losing the license for it, so pick it up whilst you can. Like I said, season 2, nobody really likes. I actually think it's not too bad. The first half of it is pretty good, but then the last 1/3 of it gets a bit too weird and crazy, and the ending is sort of a slap in the face for a lot of fans. So I wouldn't really recommend it at all. But there are some parts of it that I do really like, so that's why I own it. But yeah, as a Black Butler anime, it doesn't really work. It tries very hard to fit within the franchise, and it really just, you know how people don't like Tokyo Ghoul Route A, manga fans don't? That's what season 2 of this show is. It's not even a season 2 really, so yes. But overall, Black Butler is a pretty decent show, and I don't mind this box set of that. Speaking more on Black Butler, we have a book of Circus, the recent 3rd season of this show, which is not a direct follow-up to either of those 2 seasons. It's adapting the circus arc from the manga, which is probably one of the most well-known arcs and probably one of the most beloved. And I actually do appreciate if Black Butler is going to be adapted in this way now, arc by arc, because I think it works better, rather than them having to stick to a certain amount of episodes and then have, you know, more original content and all that sort of thing. Book of Circus is not my favorite arc of the manga, but it is very good, and I definitely understand why. It's probably the first that you see a lot more background on Seal, our main character, and yeah, so just in that way it's really very good, definitely worth the watch. He's a very broken individual, a very fascinating character. And then again, Book of Murder, which is the OVA sequel series to Book of Circus. It is the immediate arc after the circus arc in the manga, and it's sort of more of a playful thing. It is sort of making fun or inspired by Holmesian mystery, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories of Sherlock Holmes, and it sort of implies that they influenced and were the basis for Sherlock Holmes and the mystery novels. It's a bit of fun. It's again gets quite dark in the way that Black Butler so lovingly does, but it compared to like Book of Circus, it is just like a more comedic, less serious bit of fresh air before we go into the luxury liner arc, which is a film. And I'm really looking forward to it because that is my favorite arc of this, the manga, or one of my favorites, and I cannot wait to watch that. Next is another box set. This is from Studio Dean, and this is actually the first show that really showed off that they could do really interesting visual stuff. Previously, in the early and mid 2000s, Dean was sort of a laughing stock. It was well known for very low budget, sort of ugly looking anime. I mean, it's well known for all of the BL shows that they did, like Sekaiichi Hatsukoi and Jonjo Romantica, but even their non-BL stuff was sort of frightfully cheap looking and just not very aesthetically pleasing. With this show, it really turned a page in their history, and since then Dean has gotten, I mean, they've done some great stuff. Some of my favorite series have been animated by Dean, or favorite recent series, should I say, and this really was the first of them, and that is Sankareya Undying Love. the zombie love story, which is a lot more than that premise really suggests. The manga is, of course, longer than the show, but the show is very, very, very good, stylistically as well as story-wise, although it does have a non-ending, of course, because of ongoing manga. But yes, this show actually surprised me with how much I enjoyed it, and the premise, whilst being a little bit weird, is definitely one to try out. I'm sure that there's been re-releases. This actually doesn't have the fixed discs in it. That is a plan for another day. I'm just really lazy. It's not super high on my priority, and I'll buy the fixed discs once I get around to rewatching this one. But until then, the broadcast, the initial discs are just fine. Next is a show that I absolutely adore. It's a bit of a cult loved series, and one that isn't necessarily for everyone, but if you like horror, if you like thriller, if you like things like Shiki, which I mentioned before, very high suspense, high tension, then I definitely recommend From the New World, based off of the novel of the same name. It's a science fiction, fantasy-esque story about society in the future after people have developed psychokinetic powers. And yeah, it's sort of a story of brainwashing and governmental oversight and like the hive mind versus the individuality and civil rights, and there's so many heavy, interesting topics in this show. I adore it. Although some people do not like the ending, I have no problems with it. Yes, as you can see, released by Hanabi here in Australia. This was a Sentai show in the US, and oh my goodness, if you have not heard of this show, I greatly encourage you to try it, especially if you're a horror fan. Again, another one with a very interesting animation aesthetic to it, and really very, 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 very good. I mean, one of the larger parts of this series is the question of gender and sexuality in society, which, if you've watched my videos, you know that's something I'm very interested in. Yes, and I think that turned a lot of people off the series initially, but power through it. It's well worth it. I mean, you should... hopefully you have the maturity to not get upset over certain things, but yeah, it is well worth the hype and the critical acclaim that it so deserves. Next is another UK release. This is actually a Universal release, and this is part 1 and part 2 of season 1 of The Heroic Legend of Arslan. The complete first season on Blu-ray. I have yet to watch the second half of this, but it is the recent anime adaptation of the novels, the novel of the same name. This one, of course, with Hiromu Arakawa's art design, based off of her recent manga adaptation. This book series or book novel, I don't know, is very popular. It's well established. There's been a lot of OVAs and sort of adaptations over the years. So Hiromu Arakawa hasn't really done anything new with this, but I really like her aesthetic design, and the show itself is very, very good. Although it's not a favorite. It wouldn't probably even be a favorite of that season, but I really like Universal's release for this show. It's very, very good, and it looks beautiful on Blu-ray, just as an aside. I'm looking forward to see what else Universal is releasing in the near future. Next is another UK release. This is another anime limited release. That is Blood Blockade Battlefront. I picked up this one again, Digipack, and look how thick that book is. Compared to the US release, mostly because I don't know, I just like anime limited's releases a little bit more, and they tend to be more consistent with packaging than Funimation. I can't really rely on Funimation on keeping everything looking the same. But yes, I enjoyed this show. Another really great series, manga adaptation by Bones, and I'm looking forward to the second season that we're getting later this year. What they'll do with it, I don't know, but I mean, this show was a lot of fun. Again, I really like sort of magical New York setting, I guess. It seems to be quite popular in Japan, and I will eat it up. Although this is less 1930s gangster and more Hellspawn from, the other dimensions. Very Lovecraftian at times. And finally, for this fourth shelf is all of my Australian and UK releases of the Monogatari franchise. So we have Bakemonogatari in this one, the entirety of the 15 episodes, as well as Nisei Monogatari, the sequel, as most people would be aware of, using, of course, artwork that we see all the time from these releases. Very iconic. And then the UK singles for a lot of the recent stuff. So we have Neko Monogatari White, Kabuki Monogatari, Otori Monogatari, which is, I actually changed my opinion on this character a lot. I think a lot of people felt that way. Oni Monogatari, which is probably my favorite of the second season stuff for Monogatari. Koi Monogatari, which is technically the final of Monogatari's second season show. And then the two OVAs, Hana Monogatari and Suki Monogatari. So I still need Owari Monogatari parts 1 and 2 and Neko Monogatari Black, as well as whenever the UK/Australia releases the Kizu Monogatari films. And of course there's always new Monogatari coming out, but I decided to get these releases rather than the incredibly expensive US releases, just because, one, price, two, I'm not losing anything by not getting the US releases aside from some postcards and like a little bit of more extra art, but I don't care either way. So yes, I have stuck to these standard releases for Monogatari, and they sit on the shelf with the box sets, mostly due to space. And that's it for this final shelf of Blu-ray box sets. Moving to standard Blu-rays, we have both seasons of Black Lagoon and the Roberta's Blood Trail OVAs on Blu-ray and DVD. A show that is just high-octane action and fun, although not necessarily suitable for everyone. The first two releases of Hunter x Hunter, a show I love with a fiery passion. I really, really am happy that Viz finally is releasing the series on Blu-ray. Kyosogika, a show that I never thought would get licensed, so I will forever love Discotheque for that license. Nichijou, the recent US release. I did previously have the Australian DVD copies, but upgraded for the Blu-ray. Soul Eater, one of Bones' shows that I really, really loved. It was one of the first sort of ongoing shows that I watched. And yeah, I mean, people complain about the ending a lot, but I don't really have that big of a problem with it. Although that might make me not necessarily a lot of people don't really share that opinion. Yu Yu Hakusho, of course, the first of Togashi's like very well known and popular series. This adaptation is marvelous. I love Yu Yu Hakusho, although I didn't watch it. Like, I don't have nostalgia for it. It was just a recent watch, and it's so wonderful. I really, really do love Togashi's work. Angel Beats. Honestly, I prefer this show and one that will be shown a little bit later compared to the normal key stuff that a lot of people love. I find it a little less melodramatic and a little more interesting, and I don't feel like I'm being manipulated. Anohana, another show that I do enjoy, but not maybe as much as other people. This is the Australian release. Clannad and After Story, probably the series that I have the most differing opinions on. I do really like it, but it's not like the saddest thing I've ever seen. Again, I have issues with key and melodrama, so that's my personal problem. That's not necessarily a issue of the show itself, but, you know, do with that as you may. Fully Cooley, the very influential 90s OVA, and yeah, it's still really a very interesting product and series. It goes through a lot of stuff, and you can either watch it on a superficial level or unpack it a little more, and both ways are perfectly legitimate. All 3 seasons of Full Metal Panic, the second raid being my favorite. I really am not like a huge fan of Fumofu. The humor, Japanese humor tends to be very hit or miss with me, and Fumofu is somewhat more misses than hits, although a lot of people do really find that series very, very funny. Ghost Hound, a really interesting sort of supernatural series, and Production IG, I think, 10th or 15th anniversary series. It's very interesting. Haikyuu, one of the, in my opinion, one of the better sports series that has been a recent sports series. I love it. I think the cast is great. I talk a lot about my love of Haikyuu all the time, so I'm not going to spend too long. That is the entirety of season 1. Hozuki's cool-headedness, the perfect dry humor that I adore, and isn't for everyone. It's a very Japanese show, but Studio Wit, I think this is a very interesting series for them to follow up Attack on Titan with, so I'm glad that it was so popular. It sold really, really well, which I think surprised everyone, so yeah, it was nice to get a bit of a change there. Humanity Has Declined, probably one of the most sharp and biting social commentaries of a whole lot of industries and society as a whole, and very funny. Really, really, really love this show. Probably my favorite of the season that it came out in. Jormungand, season 1 and 2. People compare this to Black Lagoon a lot, but they're honestly completely different shows. So yeah, don't go into it expecting Black Lagoon, is all I'll say. Little Busters is the other key work that I prefer over like the main ones that people always quote or deem as their favorite. I don't know. Maybe it's just the focus on friendship comparatively to romance in this and in Angel Beats that makes it so much stronger. Clannad and Canon and those other I find the friendship aspect to be a lot more superficial than the romantic aspect, and then it gets bogged down by all the drama. I think Little Busters and Angel Beats handles it a little bit better. And Angel Beats, although it is a little bit of a mess throughout it, Angel Beats does actually like work overall in the 2 seasons. Then we have Moribito. This is the anime works, or God, what's their name? I can't remember. The initial Blu-ray release from long ago. It has since been re-released by Viz. Phenomenal series. Recommend it to anyone who likes sort of fantasy, female-driven series, action. Yeah, it's really good. I don't see enough people talk about this show. Number 6, a show that Bones put a lot of love into, and I think the community, it came at a time where the community wasn't really very accepting of it. Of course, the female community definitely was, but it received a lot of backlash, and I think now with more shows of its ilk coming out, it would probably fare a little bit better than it did when it first came out. But really solid show, although again the ending is a little bit of a mess. Not perfect, but pretty interesting science fiction series. Parasite, of course, the action body horror series, fairly recent but modern adaptation of the 80s manga. Snow White with the red hair, which is absolutely adorable. It's basically a television adaptation of what the best parts of fairy tales could be, really, like a Disney movie, kind of. I don't know, it's really sweet. I really like it. And this is the UK release, so I'm, not in any rush to pick up the Funimation titles. Space Brothers 1 to 5, I do have the other parts on order, although they have yet to come to me. I adore this series. This is another one that I don't think many people have heard of, but it follows two brothers, one who is an astronaut, one who is an engineer, but it follows the older brother's journey into trying to become an astronaut, like his younger brother. It's so good. This is the sort of seinen that I'm all about. Fantastic series, especially if you're interested in like realistic science and space stuff in your media. I would say check this one out. It's like 99 episodes long, so a long one, but well worth it. Star Driver, so cheesy and so fun and so meme-alicious. It was the JoJo of its day, pretty much. It was coming off the tail end of like Code Geass R2, and it was a marvelous show to watch. And it honestly, like, it's not one that you're meant to get a huge amount of like thinking out of. It's just solid, hilarious, but interesting series. Sunday Without God, the light novel anime that I never expected to enjoy, but really did. It had some slow arcs in the middle, but I bawled at the end, although it did sort of drop the ball in the last minute. But I cried so hard at the end of the first arc, and then at the end of the last arc. It's a good show. Watch it. Toa no Kon is sort of like another Bones show. This is somewhat like X-Men, the anime version of an X-Men story. It's pretty interesting, and it came out before we had such a large focus on superheroes in our media, not just the Marvel films, but like One Punch Man, My Hero Academia, etc., etc. But it is quite reminiscent of X-Men in that it handles sort of topics of persecution very, very well. Suratama is the fishing anime that nobody knew we needed, but once it was around, just perfect, fabulous, wonderful. This series contains so much joy in each episode. You can't dislike it. It's something that just makes you happy constantly. It's such a weird premise, but it works so well. A bunch of kids and an alien go fishing, and then they save the world. If that doesn't get you at least somewhat interested, I don't know, guys. I don't know. I can't help you. You have no joy in your life if you don't find that at least a little bit intriguing. Haven't watched the dub, haven't heard great things about it, but the Japanese is really solid and it has a great cast and just really overall just really well done. I really love the animation as well. It has a great opening style too. Opening song and dance and everything. Bring back the Saitama dance. Everybody needs that. Then we have the 12 Kingdoms, probably one of the better known 90s fantasy series along the same veins as things like recently Yona of the Dawn and even Moribito to an extent, where it's a lot of politics and a lot of sword fighting and a lot of redheads being badasses. It is very hard to find these Blu-ray releases now. Again, these are Anime Works releases, so not exactly the company to keep their stuff in print. Ugh. But yeah, if you can find a copy of this either, on DVD or Blu-ray, it is well worth the watch. I love it. I wish we'd get somebody to relicense and re-release and rescue the light novels, because I would be all over that. Then we have The World God Only Knows, a harem show that really doesn't act too much like a harem show. And again, I said Manglobe at before their demise, before their bankruptcy, really were a studio to take risks. This is a perfect example of their risk. It wasn't very financially viable for them, but we got 3 seasons in OVA, and it's a really good show. Like, even if you're not a fan of harems, which I am not, this show and Monogatari are really the only 2 I enjoy. And World God Only Knows has such an interesting way it does its premise, and all of the characters are fairly interesting. The main character is very, very, very interesting. So yeah, I recommend you check it out. I know that Sentai has released like a complete series collection. Then we have my most guilty pleasure series. Oh, it's so bad, but it's so good. Nope, come back here. Oh my god. Cute boys, singing, Miyano Mamoru as the main character, a girl who nobody knew whether it was blind or not, a cat that turns into a hot guy. Like, it's so... This first season was a trip. Like, honestly, when this first season was airing on Nico Nico Doga, that's how long ago it was, it was an experience to watch this show. Every episode was like a communal coming together of just like, oh my gosh, it's amazing, but like, it's total trash, but it's so good. And of course now we have 5 seasons of this show. It's got 4 seasons with a 5th planned. The second season is this, as you can see. Oh my gosh, what this show started as and what it has become is just ridiculous. Universal love waves. Like, you guys, it's so bad, but no matter how, like, upset I am, no matter how bad my day is, no matter any of that, if I have an episode of Utapri to watch, I will be crying of laughter, because it's so good. It's far out, guys. It's just magical. Next is Ungo, a series which I think a lot of people dislike. I really, really like. So again, my opinion is not the popular one. It's set in a futuristic society, but it does... So a lot of stuff about science and AI and virtual reality and our relationship with technology, and it is based off of... it's based off or inspired by a series of essays, so it's not actually like a manga or, anything like that. And again, another perfect example of an otamine show, something that's so weird and like not very otaku friendly. But Bones did a great show with this, great job with this show. This prison arc especially, there's a lot of hints that you don't necessarily realize until the end of that, and then it becomes more obvious. It's really, really interesting. I don't know. Like I said, a lot of people don't like this show. I really do. It has a supernatural element to it, as well, which kind of, it marries the science and then the magic element pretty well. Like, it's not perfect, but I don't know. It's a pretty solid mystery series, and it's been a while since we've had one of those. I know a lot of people like The Perfect Insider and those sorts of shows, but I really, like, I don't know, I found them a little bit of a drag, whereas this, I never felt that. I don't know, maybe it's just my tastes have changed, or I'm just so different from everyone else, but I really, really enjoy Ungo. Next is The World Is Still Beautiful, a series that from the premise, I wouldn't expect to enjoy, but I actually really like it. Again, it's all in the execution, and The World Is Still Beautiful does it really, really, really well. I would recommend this show to fans of A Bride Story, and even things like Snow White with the Red Hair and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's really good. I think it's done very well, and quite funny. Quite, again, nice, good, level-headed female character as well. And then we have Zammed, Studio Bones, original series, OVA, I think this is originally an OVA series, released on, like, Xbox or something. It was weird. It's sort of a spiritual sequel to Eureka 7, although people wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I really like it. There's some pretty silly stuff in it, but overall, like Eureka 7, it has some great messages. The animation is gorgeous, and just, yeah, overall, pretty good. This was another one that I hadn't seen before I bought it, and this was back when I was still buying things without seeing them, but I actually really enjoyed it a lot. So, take with that as you will. And the opening and ending songs are really good. They're really good, and unfortunately the band that sang them, I believe the main singer passed away recently, so that is very sad. But man, those opening and ending songs are pretty great, so I encourage you to just watch those if nothing else. And that is it for this shelf of standard stuff. And here we have actually all of my NIS America releases. Some of these are Blu-ray DVD, some of them are Blu-ray only. There's one that is DVD only, but that is sort of the exception. So we have both season 1 and 2 of Arakawa Under the Bridge, a pretty bizarre off-the-wall comedy series about a bunch of people who live under the Arakawa Bridge. It's pretty goofy. I actually enjoy this show quite a bit. I'm sure you can still buy the standard editions of these, although NIS America have not really been doing much recently. Then we have Bunny Drop, a phenomenal, fantastic anime adaptation of a manga with a lot of issues. It's really, really lovely. Don't read the manga, but this show is, on its own, is wonderful. It's so cute and sweet and just overall amazing, and just fills my heart with warmth. And then we have Daily Lives of High School Boys, another comedy, but this one is on the more situational comedy sort of, although it does have a bit of this ridiculous, crazy humor to it. And again, so funny. I love this show a lot. It's ridiculous, and I don't know. It captured high school pretty well, despite the ridiculous, over-the-top nature of it. Especially like in single-sex schools, all boys schools or all girls schools. It does a pretty good job. Then we have Katana Gatari, the Nisoisen show that is a Gatari series, but not related to Monogatari at all. 20 12 episodes, but each episode is an hour long. When this was initially released, it was released 1 episode per month, so it actually lasted an entire year, which is pretty interesting, I think, way to do it. Then we have Kimi ni Toroke, season 1, in 2 sets, and then season 2, which is only 12 episodes, in the 3rd set. Oh, this show is so cute, guys. It's pretty much the epitome of, like, a well-done shoujo romance series. There are plenty of those around, but not all of them are great. This one is great. Then we have one of my favorite shows of all time, Natsume's Book of Friends. I talk about this show all the time. I talk about this manga all the time. I adore it. This was like the one license I never thought would get released. I say that about a lot of things, but a lot of things that I never thought would get released have been getting released. This series, I mean, this release is quite old now. It's a couple years old. That was season 1 and 2 on DVD only. Then we have season 3 on Blu-ray and DVD. And then season 4 as well, which I will show off. But this show I never thought would get a release. Chihaya Furu I never thought would get a release, but is and got announced for the premium edition today. I'm so excited and so happy. And Hyoka, of course, being another one of my favorites, which has just recently gotten announced for release by Funimation. So I have to stop thinking that things won't get released, because apparently they are getting released. If not in the US, then the UK. I mean, Descending Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju is another one that... but this is Umineko, the last of my NIS America series. Another show that I didn't think would get released, but for different reasons than those ones. Not a great anime adaptation, but I enjoyed it, even though it doesn't really have an ending. The manga is better, of course. The visual novel is probably the best, but I don't play visual novels, so I wouldn't know. So yes, those are the NIS stuff. And then I'll go into films. Going into movies, we have all of these Anime Limited films. These normally have slip covers, but I have taken them off. That is Fusei, Memoirs of a Hunter Girl. A Letter to Momo is a movie that I think I enjoy in some aspects, but people love it a lot more than I do. My Miracle, which was a Kickstarted release for this film. It took a very long time to get out, but we finally have it. And then a movie that I really, really love. It's so aesthetically beautiful, although a lot of people don't necessarily like it, and that is Sidekick School Wars. It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. I believe it's based off of a novel and a drama from the 80s that also didn't make much sense, so it all ties together. None of them make sense, and they're all sort of stories about the dangers of technology or something. I don't know, but it's pretty interesting, and if nothing else, it is gorgeous to look at. Then we have the 2 Tiger and Bunny films, The Beginning, which is sort of a recap, half recap, half original story, and then The Rising, which is the sort of a sequel film. This is great. Like, I was legitimately surprised about how much I loved that film. I liked this film too. It was pretty interesting, especially for a recap. But oh my goodness, like, I enjoy Tiger and Bunny, but oh my god, I really, really liked this film. So yeah, I got these releases mainly because the Blu-ray sized packaging and all that. It was, you know, pretty easy decision for me to make, and yeah, I know that both have a US release as well, so it's not like you have to buy these releases, but I did. We didn't get a Blu-ray release here in the Australia, which is another reason why I bought these, because they are Blu-ray and DVD. Next on films, we have a whole bunch of stuff just here. We have Akira, of course, the incredibly popular film. This is the 25th anniversary special edition with the 3 dubs? I can't remember if it's 2 or 3. But yeah, I mean, again, not one I think I need to introduce to anyone. I'm looking forward to reading the manga soonish. Then we have The Boy and the Beast, Mamoru Hosoda's latest film. It's not my favorite. It is my sister's favorite of his films, but I prefer Wolf Children a little bit more. Which is right there, as you can see. I own all of Hosoda's films. I really like. He's a great director, great filmmaker. All of his films are very emotionally resonant, which is what you should try and strive for with movies. Then we have the 3 Evangelion Rebuild films, 1.11, 2.22, and 3.33. You're not alone, you cannot advance, and you cannot redo. These are the Australian releases, as you can tell. Again, people don't necessarily like the third one. I do. I think it's probably the closest, emotionally to the original series, especially with some of the darker topics. I think the first 30 minutes is pretty pure fan service and unnecessary. Like, it's very what these films are. But the last 2 hours or hour and a half or whatever it is, majority of the film really does encapsulate the mentality of the show, which is good, because I was wondering if these rebuild films would actually capture, in essence, what is the psychological breakdown and depression of the director, and the yearning for closeness and friendship and understanding that the character Kaoru brings to the series. Of course, in the show itself, he's a very small part of the show, but he has such a lasting impact and impression on the main character that it's sort of interesting, and to see such a large majority of this film being dedicated to him. And I know people are like, oh, it's just, oh, so much gay fan. Guys, oh my god, think about it for like 2 seconds. I'm sorry if you can't. I don't know what to say to people like that. I don't know. There are plenty of legitimate reasons not to like 3.33, but in my opinion, I think it actually does capture what Evangelion at its core is, which is that cry for closeness and community and understanding and human connection, which is only briefly touched on in the first 2 films. Anyway, but those 2 films have cooler fight scenes, so that's why people like them more. Anyway, then there's Night on the Galactic Railroad, the classic film. If you have not seen this film, I highly urge you to, because the short story and this film are such staples within Japanese media. It's such a classic. It's like, I mean, they're not similar stories, but it's like being from the US and saying you've never seen The Lion King. Everyone's like, but how have you never seen The Lion King? In Japan, people are like, how have you never seen or read Night on the Galactic Railroad? It's that much of a like cultural influencer. And if you watch anime in any sort of large quantity, you would have seen a series or read a manga or whatever that makes reference to this, is inspired by this, even if you don't necessarily realize it. So yes, even on that level, it's good to watch, but the film itself is phenomenal. It's I mean, there's a reason it's stayed like a classic within society since the 40s, 50s, whenever it was written. It's really good. It's beautiful. Like, the actual short story is gorgeously written, but the film itself just encapsulates that so beautifully. Wolf Children I already talked about. My favorite of Hosoda's films is probably the one that made me cry the most. I love this movie, and I'm sure plenty of other people do as well. Then we have 5 centimeters per second. This is the Japanese release. The global edition, so it comes with the dub and subtitles. It also comes with She and Her Cat, the original short film, as well as Voices of a Distant Star, the 45-minute first film that Shinkai did. Yep, all very good, very beautiful, and the only way to get, or it was the only way to get this film on Blu-ray for a very, very long time. So luckily Discotek has just recently re-released it, so lucky you guys. Then we have Blood the Last Vampire, the only part of the Blood franchise that I really like. I'm not a fan of Blood Plus or Blood C. But I do actually like this film quite a bit. I say film, it's only 45 minutes, and it actually is very chilling and creepy compared to what the character in the franchise has become now. Then we have Children Who Chase Lost Voices, probably the least liked of Shinkai's films, although I did actually really enjoy it. I saw it in cinemas twice. I saw it with myself and my sister, and then I saw it with my sister and my mother. So yeah, it's a pretty good film. It's not perfect, but I think it's a different setting, and it really it did show how Shinkai was sort of trying to experiment with his settings and with what he could make his characters do, while sticking to what he knows, of course, being like the wistful sadness and melancholy of growing up and grief and change and all those wonderful things. Then we have Colorful, a very underrated film. I really, really like this movie. It's not for everyone. It covers some pretty heavy topics, but I do think it's a great film. I was really happy when Sentai licensed this one, because I wanted to own it for a long time. Then we have The Garden of Words, another Shinkai film, probably my least favorite of his, although the most gorgeous of his movies, only followed, well, I mean, all of his films are gorgeous, but Garden of Words is absolutely phenomenally beautiful, although I'm not a fan of the story. Your Name probably is tied for like best looking work. It's pretty gorgeous. Then we have the 25th anniversary of edition of Ghost in the Shell, and then Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence. Again, I don't think I need to introduce these films. The first one especially has been a major influencer since the mid-90s, and you can definitely, I mean, from even before that, but once we started getting more Ghost in the Shell, it really influenced how anime, cyberpunk stuff was done in anime, and of course influenced The Matrix and all sorts of things. So, yes. Ghost in the Shell, very, very good. I need to actually rewatch it. It's been a long time since I've watched either of these films. Then we have Giovanni's Island, a film I don't know how many people have seen, but is very, very good. Set during wartime, in a period in an area that I don't think too many people are aware of. It's about the Russian inhibition, like when the Russian army was inhabiting the very top northern islands of Japan during the war, and in an attempt to take over that land. And again, this one, direct reference to Night on the Galactic Railroad. It's a very prominent part. So if you're wanting to watch this, make sure you watch this first, because this one is very closely related to the themes of that one. Then we have The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Hosoda's first film, and I think probably my least favorite of his film, although I do really enjoy it. Then we have the 3 Madoka Magica films, the first 2, of course, being Recap, and then Rebellion, which I saw in cinemas. It is crazy wonderful. I have a lot of problems with Shaft as an animation studio. just overall, I think they rely a lot. They rely a lot on their Monogatari money and their Madoka money, and Shinbo and his style way too, like, it's gotten ridiculous how samey so many of their shows have gotten. But these films, especially this final film, and I mean, a lot of their good shows are wonderful. I just wish that they would get some more stylistic directors like Shinbo that aren't exact copies of him. Then we have Metropolis, the recent UK Blu-ray edition of this film, which is not like burned per order, but is actually like a pressed disc. I haven't watched this one yet, but I look forward to it. I have seen caps of the Blu-ray and like actual video of the Blu-ray, and it is miles above what the DVDs were. So if you're a fan of this film, pick up the Blu-ray. Miss Hokusai, which is a recent film, very understated, quite quiet and interesting. I enjoyed it for what it is. Not my favorite of the year, but definitely one to read, or watch, I should say, if you're interested in Hokusai and like that period of art and history and all sorts of things. Then we have Origin Spirits of the Past, a film that is not very good, but has a oh my god, I love the soundtrack, and I love the animation. There's so many gorgeous animation sequences in this film. It's the sort of thing that, like, you just put it on in the background and whilst you're doing something else, and you just listen to that music, and every so often you glance over and you're like, oh my god, that's so beautiful. But, like, it's not really, the story's not great. So, I mean, take that as you will. Paprika and Perfect Blue, two of Satoshi Kon's films. The only ones that we have on Blu-ray, at least the UK and Australia has this on Blu-ray, I know the US does not. Kon was such a great director, and neither of these are my favorite of his work, but all of his films are phenomenal. Just fantastic, fantastic movies. And yeah, again, if you haven't watched anything from Satoshi Kon, do yourself a favor and watch these films. Watch Millennium Actress, watch Tokyo Godfathers, and I know it's hard to find in the US, but track down a copy of Paranoia Agent, because all of his animated works are great, just wonderful, just perfect. Red Line, a lot of fun, very, very gorgeous hand done animation, which is not necessarily the norm anymore, and it caused a big splash when it was initially released. Very good film. Then we have Sword of the Stranger, another good film that this is a Bones film. I don't love it, but it's pretty good. Like, it has some great action sequences. It has a pretty interesting story, sort of like Moribito and even Blade of the Immortal, that sort of thing. Would recommend that one, no problem. Although, has it been re-released recently? I feel like Funimation or someone just relicensed it. I don't know if they've re-released it yet. I know the UK is like having a collector's edition. I don't know, guys. I don't know. This is the Australian release. It's in a HD DVD case though, like because of the red, but like it's actually the Australian Blu-ray. Shh, doesn't matter. That's also why like Garden of the Words is green. This one came in the pink case. I didn't switch that one, but anyway. Then we have Summer Wars. I really, really love this series. I never saw the Digimon film that Hosoda did, so I wasn't influenced by that. Like the opinion that it's basically the same movie. I don't care. It's a good film on its own. Like, it stands on its own merits. Attack on Kincrete, which is probably my sister's favorite anime film of all time. You can get these for like a couple bucks, because it's a Sony release, so they just made 50 bajillion copies, and now you can get them in dollar bins. Wonderful film. Really, really good. I recommend the manga as well, but story of brotherhood and guilt and violence and real, like, self-perception and all that sort of thing. And then finally we have the two This Boy OVAs. We have This Boy Can Fight Aliens, and then This Boy Caught a Merman. This one is much more gay than that one, although they are both somewhat a little bit... I mean, this one does sort of hint at it, but at the same time, I wouldn't really argue one way or another. This one is very, like, it's pretty obvious. I really like these OVAs. I think the art style is pretty interesting. Again, I'm one that, like, neither of these, they're only half-hour, like, OVAs, so they're not too long. The director, she's done some pretty interesting things, although Megane Bu is a series that I hate more than enjoy, and I will probably never own that show. But This Boy OVA series, there's 4 of them, 5 if you include the drama CD, are pretty solid. I like Merman a little bit more than Aliens, but Aliens is still good. And there's a short on this one called, God, I don't remember. I don't know. I can't remember. The actual, like, little shorts, they're only a couple minutes long. There's one about artificial intelligence and love that, I don't know, it broke my heart. I loved it so much. It was so good. It's pretty interesting how, like, something so short can leave such an impact on you. More so than, like, the actual film or OVA that they're trying to sell. I don't know, I find that sort of thing very interesting. Next, for films, we have a bunch of sort of, like, limited edition releases. This is Melody of the Heart. This is actually the Pony Canyon release, technically the Japanese release. It has subtitles. It's exactly, I think I bought this one from Japan, but it's exactly the same that America got from Pony Canyon. Very good film. Really, if you haven't watched this, I watch it because it's really good. It's really, really good. Padma Inverted, from the same director who earlier did Time of Eve. Not as good as Time of Eve, but it's still pretty interesting. I like his speculative science fiction stuff. Time of Eve, this is the kickstarted version of the film, as well as the OVAs. Absolutely, like, I watched the OVAs on Crunchyroll years and years ago, and the film is basically the OVAs with plus extra footage, just all stitched together. I love Time of Eve. I actually really highly recommend that one. Padma Inverted is beautiful, and it's pretty, like, likable characters, but it's not on the level of Time of Eve, in my opinion. Dokusei, which was released by Aniplex. I love this movie. It's only an hour long, and it's a, film adaptation of the BL series Classmates, which has gotten digital release in English, but not, like, no physical book printing, although I would buy it if it did. I'm a big fan of this author's work. She's also done Usabora, which is like a single volume manga, which is very, very good, as well as she did one of the shorts for the Neo Parasite F compilation manga. So yes, but this is the sort of BL adaptation we want more, compared to a lot of the very I hate using the word problematic because people have certain issues with that word and how it's used, and Tumblr culture, which I despise, but majority of, like, BL yaoi stuff that we see animated has a lot of issues. I really don't like majority of them. This is the level of BL, like, story that we should be getting animated, but we don't, because because people are weird and that's not how the market works. But this is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful release. I highly recommend it. Aniplex. I don't buy too many of their shows, but I pre-ordered this one because I knew that, like, I needed it in my collection, and I'm very happy that I did. It's phenomenal. And then, finally for these limited edition, there's another, anime limited release. Okay, back again. And we have, it's The Place Promised in Our Early Days, as well as Voices of a Distant Star, which it says there. So as I said before, I already have Voices of a Distant Star on that global edition release of 5 centimeters per second, but this is the only release of Place Promised in Our Early Days that has a Blu-ray release, and I really, really do love that film, like, a lot. It's probably one of Shinkai's most underrated films. It's probably the hardest to find as well. I don't know, guys. So that's why I bought this one, even though I have, technically now I own one of the films twice. I have, like, Shinkai's stuff, if nothing else, deserves to be on Blu-ray because it is gorgeous. The animation really, I mean, Blu-ray really does a huge service to the experience of those films, and yeah, I would encourage you to watch it Blu-ray if you have the opportunity. Of course, this being a UK release, it is Region B, so not everyone without a regionless player can watch it, but I do hope that the US sees Place Promised on Blu-ray sometime in the future, whenever that may be. And finally, for Blu-rays, we have my Ghibli films. These are in order of release, year of release. So we have Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Lofted Castle in the Sky, Grave of the Fireflies, Kiki's Delivery Service, Only Yesterday, Porco Rosso, Whisper of the Heart, Princess Mononoke, and My Neighbors the Yamadas. I think the only one I'm missing from this set, or these early works, are My Neighbor Totoro, and technically Ocean Waves, but I've said before I hate that movie so much, so even if it did get a Blu-ray release here in Australia, not the US, it does have a Blu-ray release in the US, but if it got re-released on Blu-ray here in Australia, I would not buy that because I hate that movie so much. But I need to get also Pompoko, that's the one. I need to get Totoro, My Neighbor Totoro, as well as Pompoko. I think Pompoko is one of the later ones, whereas of course Totoro is around here-ish. Yeah, so that's the first from like the mid-80s to late 90s stuff, Ghibli stuff. And then we have the Ghibli stuff from 2000 onwards, of course, with Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Tales from Earthsea, Ponyo, Arrietty, From Up on Poppy Hill, The Wind Rises, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, and When Marnie Was There. And I really, like, I'm as much a fan of the new Ghibli as I am the old Ghibli. I don't think there's been, like, a huge drop-off in quality. Some films are not as good as others, but I find that is across the board with most of the films. Like, I don't tend to think like there's a period in time where all of Ghibli's films were like fantastic, phenomenal. Of course everybody loves Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle, but even stuff like Arrietty, Poppy Hill, Princess Kaguya, and Marnie especially, what a strong note to end on. If of course that is Ghibli's final film. We never can really tell when it comes to Miyazaki and Ghibli as a whole. They're a bit fickle with the things they put out, and whether or not things will be last films or not. But I really, really do love those films. Ponyo is probably my least favorite, aside from Ocean Waves. Ponyo and Pompoko, I think, are my least favorite. Tales from Earthsea is not great, but it's still pretty interesting. It's pretty beautiful. I mean, it has issues story-wise, but it's not, you know, it's not the worst thing ever. I still do need to get the cat returns, though, for these, this set of releases. I think that's it. I think that's all of them. Maybe there's something else, but I can't remember. It's been a long time. But yeah, so with that, that is the last of my Blu-rays. I will be doing a separate DVD collection. I wasn't going to do that initially, but these just got way too long. So apologies if you're waiting for DVDs, but that will be in another video. But I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye till then.